Our resident lawyer, Despina Priala, of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay, with us every Thursday from now at least for the rest of the year to offer her legal expertise by providing some general advice on the latest of hot topics. And haven't we had some of those over the last few weeks that we've been away? Of course, she has experience spanning more than 25 years in the area of property and commercial law. She also prepares wills as part of estate planning and litigation too. She's always very busy, but luckily not busy enough to share half an hour with us, which is great. Good morning to you, Despina.
Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning, Despina, and happy birthday for yesterday.
Happy birthday. Yep.
How does it feel to be 33, my love?
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Good to hear. Well, it's so nice to have you back. So nice. And obviously, while we were gone, so much
Some stuff happened.
has happened. And obviously, one big case and so many news articles we've been reading is all about Novak, the man of the hour, or the past 2 weeks at least. Can you explain for our first segment, in simple terms, what happened? Because I know you did follow this case very closely. It was hours and hours worth of lawyers back and forward on Sunday, I believe it was. So can you explain, what happened?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And if I can say firstly, I am so happy to be back.
Yay!
I really love the show, yes, as you guys know, and I'm really looking forward to this year. So we've certainly started off the year with a bang, haven't we? And some controversial issues and storylines have hit the papers, as most people would be aware, and that is in relation to Djokovic, and quite an interesting case. And I think for the most part, whether you were for or against Djokovic, I think everyone would be happy to see the matter finished now, after probably dominating the newspapers and social media for the last week and a half to 2 weeks. So it was an interesting case, and I actually sat in on the hearing, which was live streamed on Sunday that just passed, which was a review of the minister's decision. So before that, of course, the first decision in the Federal Circuit Court, that was actually, it's still available on YouTube. So there were 4 parts to the hearing, and I listened to most of those. So the hearing that took place on Sunday was a little bit similar in that there's a lot of technical terms being used, and of course, detailed explanation or discussion about certain sections of the Migration Act. So a lot of technical points, and I suppose if you were listening in, if you were a non-lawyer, it would be over your head, and that's understandable. So I thought today we talk about it in very short summary. If we can try and give the listeners out there a simple explanation about what actually happened, if people were still interested, because there's been so many articles written, but what did it actually mean at the end of the day? And so that's what I thought we'd do. So I suppose the starting point is that it is correct that the Minister of Home Affairs has very broad powers and very wide discretionary powers under the Migration Act, Section 116, to cancel visas, which is what he did here. And the hearing on Sunday was not an appeal. It was an application made by Djokovic's lawyers to have that decision reviewed. Okay, so the hearing on Sunday was a review of the minister's decision to cancel the visa. And of course, the outcome is that the decision stood. And of course, Djokovic has, the orders were that he be deported and to leave Australia. So the mindset of the minister was to look at the matter very broadly, purely because, yes, he has very wide discretionary powers to do so. And that's exactly what he did. But where he gets these powers, the relevant sections 116 and 133C of the Migration Act, if anyone is interested, and if you read those sections, they're very long and laborious, but the short of it is that, but it does specifically say there in section 1161E that the minister can cancel a visa if the presence of the person in Australia may be or would or might be a risk. So those words alone, it tells you or paints a picture that, well, would or might be or may be a risk. So the person doesn't have to show that they are a risk or that they would be a risk. It's if that they might be or may be a risk.
So this is a decision that the Home Affairs Minister simply made because he believed that there may be an issue here. There wasn't definitely a decision, but he, by saying that he believed that there could be an issue, that was simply enough.
That's right. And what was that risk to? So the section talks about being maybe or would be or might be a risk to the health, safety or good order of the Australian community or a segment of the Australian community or the health or safety of an individual.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what the Ministers' Council was talking about at the hearing on Sunday, where he made the point quite a few times that in the Minister's view, the presence of Djokovic in Australia in his view, may foster anti-vaccination sentiments in Australia. And that's where he was coming from. And it was interesting that he didn't actually have to give or rely on specific evidence. So there's been a lot of publications out saying, well, was Djokovic or is he an anti-vaxxer? He hasn't actually come out to say that specifically. And the minister formed the belief that he might be a risk because of his conduct over the last 2 years, but specifically in the last few months. And that was enough.
Yeah, and obviously being someone of his status, naturally, he's setting a huge example.
Well, that's exactly right. So the minister formed the view that there might be, or there already was, public support to him for anti-vaccination or by anti-vaccination activists. And that of itself may cause unrest and protest. And this is going to become or foster others in Australia to support his supposed cause. Okay. And that was enough for the minister to use his very, very broad powers. And it was interesting in the hearing that the Ministers' Council did liken it to an iconic sports star, which he is, in the way that iconic sports stars like Djokovic wear branding shirts, socks, and they wear various sports brands because they're supporting that brand and they're getting paid. Was said is that, for example, this council said for the minister that it's akin to him wearing brand shirts where he endorses the brand. Okay. And he was likening that to his conduct to give the appearance or perception that he is or was an anti-vaxxer, you see. So there didn't have to be specific evidence where Djokovic came out and said, I am an anti-vaxxer, right? Yeah. It was enough for the minister to say, well, I think he's a risk from his conduct. The appearance is, or the perception is, that he does support anti-vaccination. I think that's going to create protests and unrest in the community, and that was enough for the minister to say no, the visa's cancelled.
So basically it was not exactly about safety and spreading COVID as such. It was more the influence and the repercussions from that.
Yes, and it was interesting that there was arguments where, well, if you cancel the visa or you didn't cancel the visa, either way, there's going to potentially be protests. Yeah. But that sort of didn't swing the judges that much, in that they recognised that it was cancelling the visa versus non-cancelling, and whether that would of itself create unrest. They did accept that there would be unrest both ways, but overall it is a decision that the minister made for the good health and order of the community. And overall, from what they have seen or did see of Djokovic and his behaviour and his conduct, perhaps their view was, well, no, there is, or there potentially is, or there might be a risk that, that this is going to be a risk to the health, safety and good order of the community, specifically to rally up the anti-vaxxers out there.
It's so interesting. So what do you think would have been the outcome if it was Joe Blow down the road, or even another athlete?
Yeah, like, Nadal or Roger Federer.
Well, that's an interesting point, and I think that if it was anybody else, for example, not someone that's so iconic or so famous, where they can play a bit of a role model, and people do follow what they may say or may do in terms of, and even their behaviour, and the followers that this person has, versus someone who isn't really a high-profile person. And, for example, if someone ranked 100th in the Australian Open versus number one, I think that's quite a big difference.
And different,
the minister, and given what the minister's council said, it made a huge difference here. The fact that he was or is an iconic sports person, that was definitely mentioned in the hearing, and that played a significant part. And it was interesting where what I heard is that the Djokovic's lawyers were trying to argue that the decision was irrational or legally unreasonable. And the judge said it was not for the court to decide on the merits of the decision. So that's why I go back to the words where it's all about whether the minister thinks that there may be a risk. Very, very broad powers. So previously the legislation said in the Migration Act that they'd have to show that the person would be a risk.
Mm-hmm.
And they changed that a few years ago where they changed the wording to say might be or maybe. So they've lowered the threshold.
Yeah.
And some of the publications refer to that. And that is quite correct. They've lowered the threshold. So it's enough for the minister to say, no, sorry, I think you may be a risk here.
So interesting. Oh, well, thank you for shedding some light on that topic. Long-winded topic, but shortened there by Despina Priala. Thank you so much. And coming up next, are you thinking about buying or selling a home in Queensland anytime soon? If so, stay tuned because the new changes to REIQ contracts take effect today. What do you need to know? Coming up next on Talking Law, you're listening to Radio 97.